This episode is sponsored by Magic Mind and Wix Studio.
When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode is titled, Saying No to Scope Creep, How Web Devs Can Push Back. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about taking in requests, specifically feature requests from clients, from your employer, etc., and kind of processing those, triaging them, even if you will, if it's more of like an incident, and being like, okay, do I just start coding this up? Do I take my time with it? Do I go fast? Do I push back? What do I do? With a focus on the pushback, because it's kind of awkward, right? To say, client comes to you, they say, yo, put background music on the background of my site when you're on the homepage, and you're like, and it's time to push back. And we've mentioned that a couple of times on the show. That's a blatant one, but there's a lot more to it, and we'll get into it during the episode. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app. Join us in our Discord server or share this with your friends. And just a little tiny update. We just got into the daily dev train. We just created a squad. Michael LaRocca, our contributing author, he has actually posted about it on his X profile because it's currently a private squad. Like we just, I just joined up and all the rest of it. I need a certain amount of rep to make it public so people can just sort of join/follow it. So you might need the invite link. Go check out Michael LaRocca's X post. I'll put that in the show description, but it'll be a couple of weeks before this episode comes out. So it's entirely possible that will be public already. You can just go to daily.dev, go onto their, their web app or whatever, and just check us out on there. It's the official HTML All the Things squad. It's pretty cool little web app. I've been using it personally for a couple of weeks, and I'm happy to sort of plant HTML All the Things there. But without further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. So I just want to kind of give you a bit of lay of the land more than I did in the sort of like intro, I guess, with an intro, one might say. So as web developers, we get feature requests all the time, right? Someone calls you up, hey man, can you make this slider? Hey, can you, change this so that when you click on the image, like a light box shows up? Can you change how the light box works? The list goes on and on and on. And many developers think that we, like the actual developer, we're just simply tools of the trade and that we should complete all requests. And we've had this feedback on our episodes where I've made a social post or, had a comment during an episode where I'm being like, hey, you should push back on this. Hey, you should, kind of let your client know that this is superfluous or whatever. And we've had people comment back on socials or in DMs and say, the client is always right. I just do whatever it is that the client wants. And you can do that, absolutely. It's entirely possible. There's obviously going to be some requests that you are going to push back on, like if they start to really scope creep things up, like if they're constantly calling you during times when you're not supposed to be called, giving you 8 days worth of work every 4 days and expecting it being done in 4 days, things like that. There's certain ones like that, but there's a lot of the time, there's feature requests that need to be pushed back on, not in sort of an HR sense. It's not about how long it's going to take, it's going to eat your weekend up or something like that. It's more about actually benefiting the project itself. The reason why this happens is because a lot of the people that give us, the developers, a feature request, they're non-technical staff, right? They hired us to be the expert. They hired us to be in the in-house development team. And they, in plain English, just know that for marketing purposes, they need a slider. For marketing purposes, they need a blog post. They need a sidebar. They need a pop-up for their newsletter. That's all they're asking for. They're not asking for, oh, do you think that'll work with the CMS? Do you think that will work timing-wise with this? And they don't know all the stuff that we're developing, and they don't know how to develop it. So they have no idea how much time things are going to take, if it's performance-intensive, things like that. And I've kind of pigeonholed, I suppose, these requests into three general categories. And there's actually another one that I'm going to explore later on in the episode. And it's basically sometimes requests will come in and they will be superfluous. So it'll just be, just arguably just too much, right? It's like, hey, can you integrate, some AI thing into my CMS for me really quick? Because I saw that somewhere. And it's like, oh, are you going to use it a lot? Well, just for the headlines. It's like, you could just use ChatGPT and copy paste rather than me doing all this dev work. And again, we'll dive into that a little more later. There's also a potential to harm the project, which is sort of the second camp that I have here, which is that they may make a request and it might mess things up, like the background music. They might have a thing like a feature request that is way too performance heavy, and it may cause the site to take forever to load, and then you're going to bounce people away. And that also sucks. So that's not great. And also you're going to have, and this is a little bit HR-ish, but it goes deeper than that. And I'll get into it again deeper in the episode. And that is that these feature requests, if you do them, may cause a significant drop in productivity. So many companies are obviously thinking about shipping fast, right? They want to go fast. They're agile. They want to boom, 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 get a bunch of deliverables out. And you don't want to be bogged down by things that are, possibly superfluous, like we've already talked about, or you don't want to be bogged down with, oh, we need to have like a dynamic, SERP description thing for our open graph on Facebook. You don't want to get bogged down messing around with that in particular when there's a big, a massive incident on the other side of the company where a web app is down. And so you don't want to have like this like sort of productivity hit because you're dealing with requests that aren't going toward the goal of the company. And you're just sort of like, doing tickets in due time. So there comes a point when you're like, hey, this is going to actually hurt the productivity of me, you, the company, however far the scope of that goes. And the thing is that realistically speaking, if you're one of those people that still disagree with me and you're like, developer is a cog in the machine, customer tells us or boss tells us to do this, we do it, no questions asked, short of technical questions of how they would like it done. We do it, even if it, completely blows up the app, even if it, ruins the SEO and whatever. That's fine. Again, like I said, if that's the way you want it, that's the way the person you work for wants it, great. But oftentimes, if you are personally invested in the project, either literally like you're financially in there, or you're just kind of personally invested on a, hey, I'd like this to succeed kind of angle, then you may feel the need to push back on some of the requests that you receive. And sometimes if you get that feeling, there's going to be some questions kind of rushing through your mind. It's like, I'm at work. Is it acceptable for me to push back? I'm a freelancer. Is it okay if I push back against a client? Like, is the customer always right? What if I've been at work for a long time, my employer knows me well, but it's still my employer. At the end of the day, it's still my employer. I have a great relationship with them, but can I push back against them? When should I push back? Right? Should I push back when I'm annoyed? Should I push back when I have actual proof? Do I need to make a PowerPoint? When do I push back? And then also, how far should I go to make a client's request come true? And that one's going to be a little bit of a more lighthearted angle because it's more about, how much are you going to handhold the client and how much responsibility comes on each party? And I'll get into that later on in the episode.
So I think a couple things here is I also want to kind of point this from a different direction where it's not a client and maybe it's just an employer. And a lot of times, manager-employee situation, it's a little bit different as well. But a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is also going to apply to that because a non-technical manager especially, or a non-technical PM, project manager, can have these come up pretty often, like superfluous, like requests that are outside the scope of a project or just random feature requests that could damage the timelines of a project and stuff like that. And it's important for developers on teams, not just, freelancers, to be able to answer and push back and give reasoning and stuff like that to these requests as well. In some cases, obviously, you're going to have to do them. In some cases, it's okay as long as the communication between you and the person you're talking to and the person requesting is clear, depending on, if it's going to move the timelines or whatever. And we'll get into that in a sec. But as long as that is communicated, sometimes you're going to have to, bite the bullet and do it. But in terms of like, whether you're a freelancer or an employee at a company, this is a super key skill to have. You have to have a backbone. And you're going to realize that so quickly in the industry or in like, once you get into client work or regular work, that like the developers without a backbone are very obvious to see, or even like companies that don't allow you to have a backbone. It's really easy to see that in a code base because the code base is usually quickly janked together. There's stuff on top of each other. There's, dissociation from the project in the developers because, anything that they've suggested has been pushed back on. And usually the code quality suffers, the actual product suffers, everything's like, if I get into a company or if I'm like consulting on something and I see a situation like that, it's very easy to tell that, like, hey, you're not allowing the developers to have a voice, or you have developers that aren't able to respond back, or they can't, like they don't know how to respond back. So you need to kind of create that relationship in a better sense to be able to allow the developers to tell you that this is wrong. The feature that you're asking for, this AI feature, is wrong. And that comes from so many different angles. Again, it comes from the employee angle, it comes from the contractor angle, it comes from the person that's like, if you're looking to hire developers and you're listening to this podcast, you have to take that into account and stuff like that.
You're right, because the requests that come in, like specifically with web development, like it touches so many different areas, right? Like you're talking to other engineers if you're on a team, you're talking to the marketing side of things, you're talking to the technical writers. So like they might be writing the guides and that goes on to, a wiki that you've made, or it goes on to, an intranet site, or like the content writers need their blog posts out. And the reason why I mention that is just because there's so many different areas that this stuff touches that you do need to have a bit of a backbone and say, hey, we can't get this done on time. I don't think this is going to work. Our intranet is loaded up. There's not enough space on the server, and I'm not going to like start hyper compressing images and have some crazy algorithm bring them back from the blurry dead, things like that. Like it's just straight up not going to be a good time, right, for you. And so you need to come up with these problems and say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and, kind of have a voice in that way. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, at length and in depth and into these little categories and little sort of areas that I've etched out in the rest of this episode. But before I do that, I want to quickly talk about my experience with MagicMind lately. I think it was the last time we spoke, I was, very, very busy, and it's the end of summer, so it's still very, very busy. I'm driving here, there, everywhere. I went up north, I went down south, I went east, west. I don't know if I went down south, but I went east, west, whatever. And not only is that a feat of engineering because my car is very old, it is also a feat that MagicMind has helped me get through. So I've been driving at weird times, driving up to hotels at 4 a.m, quite literally, because it's like I did an event. Then we have to get there and it's hours away. We got to be there in the morning. So it's like, okay, I guess we're doing this type thing. And my MagicMind has been with me the entire time. Every time I get a little bit tired on the road, it's perfect. Little tiny bottle of MagicMind does me great. Drink some of that. Keeps me alert, keeps me focused, keeps me going. I'm not jittery. I'm not panicked. I'm just sort of driving where I need to drive. Thankfully, a lot of it is highway driving and it's easy driving. But again, MagicMind is keeping it even easier. The way I see it is, if I'm on the highway, it's, again, like I said, easy drive. In particular, it's like easy to fall asleep. And so I'm glad to have something with me that doesn't have to be an energy drink. I don't have to have something sugary. I don't have to have something that's totally loaded with caffeine. I'm able to have this, this really quick shot of MagicMind, gets me up and going, keeps me alert on the road. That's been my mileage, if you will. I was waiting to say that this whole time. That's been my mileage with MagicMind lately. Like I said, end of the summer, crazy busy, and it's been great having it there by my side. And if you would like to get a hold of your own MagicMind, you can get 20% off one-time purchases and subscriptions by using our code HTMLPod20. That's all caps, HTMLPod20, no spaces, no dashes, no nonsense. And remember to use that code at our link, magicmind.com/HTMLPod20. Again, magicmind.com/HTMLPod20. That will be in the show description as well as in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. Go check it out. If you are driving around a lot like me, you might find it to be a great pick-me-up without having the jitters, without having the stress, and without having... I'm going to be honest, I just start to sweat and panic if I have too many energy drinks. So it's a great thing to have when you're driving around all over the place, going on vacation, checking things out, going to weddings, whatever it is. that you are driving to. I find it to be a fantastic companion for that. So, should you push back against feature requests? I think you've probably already got the writing that's on the wall. Mike and I have already discussed this in previous episodes. We've talked about it a little bit here. Yes, you should sometimes, right? As a hired developer, you're going to receive work requests commonly from people that are not technical, like I said, and they're making their requests from a place of ignorance. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. You're the hired person, right? They're aware, I don't know how to code. I don't know what development times are. I don't know this. I don't know that. So I'm going to hire a developer, which, maybe you, and they expect you to fill in their blank of technical knowledge. Now, of course, some employment situations are more of a, you're a cog in the machine, but many are not, right? And that's kind of, I guess, the focus of this episode. It's the workplaces that will sort of allow you to do this pushback because they're trying to get you a little bit invested in the project. You want it to succeed, and you want to let the marketing staff know, like, hey, that's going to take forever. Hey, that's not going to work. You changing the opacity of that number is actually going to take like 4 days. Do you want me to do that? Is that too much? Is that too little? Et cetera, et cetera. So I've already talked about the multiple sort of areas. I'm going to go deep dive into them now. So I'm just going to list them out. So we have superfluous requests. They may harm the project. They may cause a significant drop in productivity. Again, these are feature requests that are, ones that you may want to push back on. And I have an extra one here, a bonus one, interrupt existing timelines and feature developments. It kind of ties into the other ones, but I thought I should mention it at the end. So, superfluous requests. Many requests are made as a matter of convenience. So, for example, can you integrate an AI writing assistant to help me write my blog posts? That comes to you from the marketing team. This seems easy to them. They are seeing other CMS programs. They're seeing, browser extensions, things like that can do this. So to them, they go, hey, I wouldn't mind trying that out. Developer, can you please make this for me? Well, this could be easy for you, and maybe you could just do it. But this does depend on your CMS. And if your CMS is not immediately compatible with this, this could take you hours and hours to implement a bunch of custom code and everything else. And if you think about it, the marketer could just go to ChatGPT, they could go to Copilot, and they could copy and paste the results as needed. Some CMSs have these AI assistants built in, but it's not immediately obvious to the person making the request that, hey, they're using this as a selling feature, right? It's clearly something that took the development team of the CMS time to do. They just think, oh, someone else has this feature, so I should be able to have this feature, right? They're not aware. And so this is a superfluous request, right? Now, in some cases, if you might have to have a conversation with them. So you may want to have some pushback in the form of questioning them. So you may go, how much are you going to use this? What are you going to use it for? Can we do a workaround? Like, have you tried Copilot? Have you tried ChatGPT? Have you tried a browser extension like Microsoft Editor? Have you tried a browser extension like Grammarly? Have you tried any of those first? Do you want to try this thing out before I actually go in and do it? Because they may try it once and go, I hate all the AI's writing. And now you just did all that work and it was completely superfluous. Now you have this fancy feature that not only took a lot of time to build, but you also have to maintain it now or remove it safely. And that's just adding to your technical debt. And so superfluous requests like this, of which this is only one example of many, and should be something that you should push back on, or at the very least be more inquisitive and say, okay, hang on, why is it that you want this? Because I'm saying a lot of these superfluous requests are just like, hey, it would be convenient for me instead of having to copy and paste this over to the MailChimp, for example, right? If it's the marketing team, I just kind of want the program to do it. It's like, okay, but like copy paste across 2 tabs versus God knows how many hours it is to like open up the MailChimp, possibly use an API. It's a whole thing. And this is really, really common. Mike, like you and I have had this a few times where we've worked with people on either a no-code or a low-code project where they're using Elementor, and that's kind of where their budget's at, or maybe it's Webflow, whatever, it doesn't matter. And when we're working with them, they'll ask for something like, hey, you know what? I actually want like a super interactive map. Or we had a client who needed a store locator, pretty simple. However, not just a store locator with like there are 10 locations, 100 locations. I'm talking like a store locator, like 6,000 locations on this thing. It was a really, really, really big thing. And I had to explain to them, just to let you know, you're effectively asking me to make an app. Like the whole project that we've done so far, which took months and months of planning, prep, design, theory, whatever else, that's all great. Now you're literally asking me to make you a whole project effectively and then like embed it. So like your one piece of the one page that you're asking for is a whole app. And so what we ended up doing was we said, okay, that's superfluous. Like we shouldn't make a custom one. And we went to another company that, has store locators. And then they really got the message because they found out, hang on, this is going to cost me Google Maps API calls. This is also going to be, I forget what it was, $60, whatever it is, a month from the store locator app. And they're like, you're telling me that the whole website is like $150 every 6 months or so to host. But then this, like just this is going to be like $30 a month, $40 a month, $100 a month. How many people are going to use it? Who knows? And then I'm like, well, yeah, like I'm telling you, this is an app in and of itself. And then it's like, okay, then the scale gets drawn back a little bit and things get adjusted. So this is how you kind of push back and have that push and pull for something it's just superfluous. And also, who's going to go through 6,000 locations? Sometimes it's like, hey, pump the brakes. Let's take a look at why we want this. The next thing here is a request comes in and you're like, uh-oh, this may harm the project. This may hurt things. So in the context of websites, something like background music is kind of seen as taboo. Mike, I know you love background music on websites. You love the slow, like twinkle star like music that's on like gift shop websites. You just love it so much.
There's no better way to get me off your website than to put background music on it.
Not only was it taboo in the desktop age, but it's taboo now, especially on mobile, because sometimes you have your volume on, but you just go to a website, you're not playing a video, and then it's playing this, background music to serenade you, to try to get you to buy. But what it actually does is it may harm your site because people are going to go, I don't want that. And so they're going to turn people like Mike away, of course. Also, websites are at the mercy of external forces. A big one is SEO and search engines, right? So if someone comes to you and says, I want all of our titles to have a whole bunch of nonsense in there, and I mean the meta title, the actual title tag, I want these things to be filled with all this nonsense because it's going to help us organize it internally, but the website needs to still perform. You got to go to them and say, I got some news for you. Unfortunately, I don't control Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and the rest of them, and they don't like this. And we have to adhere to what the SEO strategies are today. We have to adhere to what the search engines want to display. And it's an external force. And I can't call Google and say, yo, just give me an exception because I want a bunch of like nonsense and a UID and my title and all that. It's not going to happen. So you're going to have to push back on something like that and say, just to let you know, this is not going to work. Now, one thing that I would like to say, particularly with SEO, because I've had many arguments with people about SEO, is people will just deny me. They'll be like, no, that's not right. You got to just make it work. Or I get the classic, well, I know there's a meta keywords tag, right? Just do that. That is not really read in by Google at all, or not much anymore. I don't even use it really anymore. To be honest, I haven't used it in quite a while. And so I'm just like, hey man, like, sorry, but you not writing content with your keywords, you not having your, all your SERP stuff, your title and description, have your keywords in there within reason, not with keyword stuffing, but within strategy. And you just want to have, your content be whatever, and you want me to have your keywords in the keywords meta tag, it's not going to work for you. And I'll get told, nah, that's nonsense, whatever. So I'll be like, I'll agree. I'll be like, okay, whatever. But I'll be like, let me be clear. I don't control this. And so you are effectively signing off on tanking your site traffic. And they'll usually get a little mad. It'll definitely happen. They'll be like, no, what are you talking about? Like, you just don't know what you're doing is a classic one that I've gotten several times. You don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, cool. If you just look this up, you will see that I am like correct in this. And oftentimes they will then give way. The number one thing I do is I throw it into their camp. Sure, I'll do what you asked. By the way, this is going to tank your website. It's your decision. You okay with that? Well, no, I'm not. Blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like the people have like the stages of like what it is, like denial, and they're upset and whatever. It's almost like a very, very, very minor version of that, where some people are so stuck in like, I want my content to be like this. It's like we have external companies that we need to effectively please. And unfortunately, we don't control those companies. So what is the solution for you to get to the traffic you want, which is usually always higher, growth, but also like all you're sacrificing is like some different content writing or some nonsense in the title, things like that. So effectively, you're trying to stop them from harming their site. And if they demand to harm the site, so you've pushed back, if they demand to harm the site, I mean, I guess you could do it, but they better be informed and hopefully in writing that, hey, this isn't going to work out and you're going to lose some traffic. And also, another common harm that we see is people will ask for stuff that is just totally ridiculous on load times. Massive image galleries with uncompromising image resolutions, just massive image files. They don't want to change to WebP. They don't want to change to AVIF. They don't even want to change to JPEG. They want these huge files on there. They want them all there. They don't want it to lazy load. They want everything. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. And you got to tell these people, this is going to harm the project. This is going to hurt the project. You cannot have this page take a minute to load. Under no circumstance are people going to wait for that. They're going to think the site's down. They're going to leave. Now, I know that, website performance is a hot topic. A lot of SEO guys will, especially the centric ones, will be very like, get every single ounce of performance out. Whereas the more developer side is like, just make the performance good. And like, if it's good enough, then people won't bounce. I know that's kind of an argument. We're splitting hairs a little bit when we have that conversation. But the sort of situations that I'm talking about when to push back is when it's really, really bad. I mean, Mike, like you and I have had it quite literally where we've had people ask us, can we have 1,000 blog posts with all their thumbnails load on one page, no pagination, no compression, no lazy load, no method, no show more. That's it. Like, I want to see them all. It's like, yeah, like it's going to take a long time. Like, what did you expect? Right. And so you have to kind of push back and say, again, no, like this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt your project. It's going to hurt your user base. It's going to hurt your traffic. The other thing here is actually something where it might affect you, it might affect them, it might affect the company, it might affect another team, because their request may cause a significant drop in productivity. So many companies are looking to build and ship fast. I said that earlier this episode already, and they want to add features quick, go. But every single feature adds to the technical debt of the website. So if you, let's say, they tell you, let's add this feature in, whatever it is. It's going to take 6 hours. Okay, we're willing to take the 6 hours. You do the initial development, 6 hours, boom. You ship it in 2 hours, boom, hooray. But it takes 3 hours a month to maintain. But you don't have that? Like, that feature didn't just take 6 plus 2. It didn't just take 8 hours. It's now a recurring and no end insight 3 hours each month. So this may cause some problems, right? Because A, it's going to hurt your productivity and it's going to slow down their future requests. So now you're blocking them because you're spending 3 hours not developing new features, not maintaining features that actually matter, but you're actually going in and you're messing around with maintenance. You're messing around with this, you're messing around with that. So it's important in this case to push back in the way where you look at what the feature request was and you look at it and you go, okay, this company, let's hypothetically say, is looking to build and ship fast. We need to have our features and our everything to align with pushing the company forward. We're a startup, maybe. We're looking for new customers. This is where we're at, right? If the feature doesn't align with pushing the company forward, it sounds like this feature may become a time sink. And it sounds like it could disaster productivity. So what we really need to do is we need to have a meeting. We need to have a pushback and go, hang on, who's going to use this? What are they going to use it for? Is it saving someone else 6 hours and it's taking my 3? What is this? Because we all work as a team here. And every single time me, the developer, I can't help the marketing team with something. Now they're waiting. We can't do it. We can't do it this week. We got to do it next week. Now they're waiting a week. And so this could cause having this sort of heavy technical debt, throwing in superfluous features goes beyond just the superfluous feature itself. It starts to actually affect the productivity of other teams, of your team, potentially even of the whole company, depending on how widespread it is.
I think with the drop in productivity one, I've had this happen from many different angles. One angle recently was currently we're working with purely Svelte kit. And we had someone suggest externally from the engineering team that, hey, we should add this package or add this little feature onto the app. And it was a feature that was built with React. And they're like, well, it'll take you a couple hours to get it up and running as a little side project thing. And that's something where I was like, yes, it could get up and running quickly, but that will significantly affect our productivity moving forward because we're a Svelte, everything is in Svelte. Having to maintain a whole separate repository of React applications, everyone's going to have to get cross-trained on it. Everyone's going to have to get up and running on React, and then we're going to be split between these two code bases. We're talking like hours upon hours upon hours across the team of loss of productivity for a small little decision that we could just, it'll take us maybe an hour longer to build it in Svelte, and then everyone understands how it works. So like a lot of times you're going to have to push back from many different perspectives on the productivity side. Another one is like, do you do your lint checking? Do you do that on the server? Do you do that on the client? Do you do that in your pipeline? Like, where do you check if the code is formatted correctly? If what you're doing is too complicated and all of a sudden your team is fighting the actual checking of code rather than writing code, that's a significant drop in productivity. And that comes from like, maybe a manager will bring that down to you and that's something you have to fight back. Or maybe, it's a legacy thing and that significantly drops productivity. You need to fight those as much as you can because productivity drops like this can add up. So you have like 5 or 6 different ones. And then all of a sudden your team is fighting to even get a feature out there because all of these weird little decisions that were made to get something out faster or to do something in a more like standard way or something like that, all of a sudden become the thing that destroys your team's throughput. This one is really, really important. Like it can happen slowly and can all of a sudden disastrously destroy your team's ability to actually ship code.
And if, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but these decisions can be made super incorrectly, I would say, super early as well. Like somebody might go, we want all of, whatever product it is, we want it all developed in-house because we expect it in 6 years, in 10 years to scale to a point where it's not feasible to go to a no-code tool, hire a company that does it, use an app that is a per-use app that you have to pay for. We don't want to pay those API fees. We don't want to pay those subscription fees. But then you have to you have to take a step back and go, hang on, these are projected numbers. Chances are we'll be below them. Even if we're on pace with them, it's in 10 years. In 5 years, it's okay to start building the app. Maybe today we should start with the no-code tool. Maybe today we should start with this plugin. Maybe today we should use this thing that allows us to push forward because people don't realize like, oh, we'll develop in-house. It'll be fantastic. Will it? Because you're developing in-house. It's all new. You have to QA. You have to constantly, check things. You have to have monitoring, assuming it's mission critical. So you have to have monitoring. You have to have someone around to make sure that if it goes down, it gets fixed. You have to have someone around, you know what I mean? Like it's everything. Someone around to maintain it. Someone around to like not necessarily even maintain it, but like watch the logs and stuff. See if like little bugs or not even bugs, but like UX problems come up, things like that. Whereas if you hand it off to somebody, like if you're like your marketing team is like just starting a blog, it's not totally crazy to just be like, yo, I'm just going to go to WordPress.com or something. I'm just going to use a no-code tool. I'm going to use Wix Studio. I'm going to use whatever. I'm going to use one of these and I'm going to make my blog. And then if I outgrow the tool, great. I've outgrown the tool and it's time for me to change. Not I'm anticipating outgrowing it from the get-go with like minimal evidence and a super long timeline, right? It's not like you have 2 million pre-orders for your blog and you're like, yo, we got to build, there's evidence. We got to build this thing custom. And like you've been in that situation, Mike, where like there's been major problems with like customers' app. And like every time the problems came up, it was pandemonium. People weren't even checking logs. Like it was just pandemonium. People were running around trying to figure out what the heck was going on. There's war rooms and crap. And it's just like, what's going on in here? Like, why are we on this? Like, why aren't we just paying someone else to run this for us until we get to the stage where we need to do all this custom stuff? Because clearly we're not equipped to deal with incidents and we're losing more money with all the downtime. Like, it's just foolish. Devs, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less on Studio. Integrate, extend, and write custom scripts in a VS Code-based IDE. Leverage zero setup dev, test, and production environments. Ship faster with an AI code assistant. And work with Wix headless APIs on any tech stack. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Link in the show description and in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think taking on too much with a small team like that, like perfect example is, hey, let's host everything on AWS, custom. when there's plenty of good solutions that can kind of package it for you. Yeah, you need a DevOps guy to be able to do that. Like, you can't just have random Joe McGee that's never touched AWS all of a sudden build a production application on it. It's a whole certification requirement that you need. So you're either going to be, hiring a DevOps person, and then that's fine. Like, you can host on AWS at that point, or you are going to have a disastrous time. And like Matt said, you're just going to be in war rooms all the time because you don't know what the hell's going on. And you're going to learn in the fire pit, and you're going to waste a bunch of money and time and productivity. Like, it seems obvious when we say it like this, but a lot of people will still push back and be like, well, you shouldn't host on Vercel, or you shouldn't host on like shared hosting or whatever, because of the fact that, yes, in traditional environments where you have 10 million people accessing your application at all times, it doesn't make sense to do the more the easier approaches that are limited. But when you're starting out, when you're a startup and you only have, potentially 0 customers, you need to take into account the productivity of a team more than anything else. That's the number one thing. How fast can you build this? How reliably can you build this? And how can you maintain it without having to kill your productivity?
And I'll actually mention an example that we just ran up against. I mean, and I didn't have to give too much pushback. They agreed with me pretty quick, but I was helping out a client who was looking into getting into e-commerce for the very first time. And it was very much a question of like, I think I need a website. And so she like lays out all the stuff. And so I'm like, okay, these are the 3 solutions. I recommend you go with this one. And what I recommended was you go with the absolute cheapest, like totally cheapest Shopify plan. It's the starter plan. You go with that. We're not building a site. I'm helping you, use an admin panel. We don't have to worry about the maintenance. We don't have to worry about the server going down. If it does, Shopify does it. If you want to expand into in-person stuff and you want to have a point of sale terminal, you can actually use an iPhone for that. Or you can use a point of sale terminal. There's options. If you ever open up a storefront, which is unlikely in this particular case, they can equip your storefront. So we have scalability on the brain, but let's start with the easiest one. Yes, we could go one step up and have the Shopify website builder, but no, like we don't know how to do the inventory and stuff yet. We don't know how to do the product imagery yet because everything was done in person in this particular person's business. So I said, okay, let's take a step back. Let's go do the easiest one. We'll do that. And thankfully, the pushback worked. It's like, yes, let's do it. And it's been successful. We've launched. They're processing orders. They're dealing with credit cards and stuff. They're learning the shipping game a little bit right now, which is great. So now they're not worried about the website not working and the shipping not working. Now it's, let's get the shipping working. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And does the website look amazing? No, it looks just plain. It's just a basic, here's a Shopify, template. There aren't, magical beings flying around and it's like the best designed thing ever. It's perfect for exactly what it is. This person advertises on Facebook, on Twitter, on wherever, on social media, and they just say, hey, I have a new product. Please go check it out. And it takes you right to a page, add it to your cart, pay with Shop, whatever. It's super simple, pay with e-transfer, which is a Canadian thing. Like totally easy, simple, and then it's like, great. And then even when we finished the call and we launched recently, it was brought up. Once I get used to this, I kind of want to scale up. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what you should do. You get used to this and people like buying online from you. Fantastic. Now we can say, now let's make our own product pages. Let's make things look nice. Like it's not that they look bad. It's like, let's make it look the way we want it to look now. Let's, change the button colors, change the button sizes, change what the gallery looks like, change the home page, have a little bit more SEO centric, have a custom URL, those type of things. Maybe get a point of sale terminal if you actually want to like tie everything together. Use Shopify as your inventory system. Like there's so many different things that you have to consider beyond just, well, let's just like build an e-commerce site. It's like, I mean, literally, Mike, like you and I have made a full e-commerce site for somebody in the pandemic. I did a demo for them. They were super happy with it, but I think they realized, and this is just my impression of what their reactions were. They realized, oh my God, we have to learn how to do all this. We have to manage inventory. We have to manage orders and all this. It's like, well, yeah, like what else? Like, what did you expect? That site never went live. We got paid. It was like, no one got hurt or anything, but it was just sort of like, I think they realized like, oh my God, like we are going to have to learn this. We're going to have to train our staff on this. Because how else are you going to do it? How else are you going to do orders? And like, you don't want someone to order something that's out of stock so that you have to do inventory levels. And that's going to have to somehow play into the other. Like, it's not easy. It's very easy to think, I just need a website and that's what I need. And then when you get there, you're like, oh my God, like, how do I process credit cards? How do I do this, that, the other thing? Not easy. Not easy and not time consuming. Good double negative there, but you get what I'm trying to say. So I do have, two other things I just want to kind of touch base on because I mentioned it earlier in the episode, which is that, two kind of different ways to push back and two different ways to look at it. So the first one is, pushing back on an employer. You're just employed there. You're an employee. You have an employee number, maybe, whatever, right? This is often more difficult than pushing back against a client because you are commonly considered a subordinate. Now that's people are going to say that's very dystopian, but you are. You're typically considered a subordinate. You are a cog in the machine. You were hired because the development department did not have enough throughput. You were hired to add to the throughput, right? So some companies, depending on culture, don't reject this notion. These are the companies that you should push back against. What do I mean by that? So a company comes in, or the company that hires you doesn't just think that you're a cog in the machine. They want you to get excited. They want you to have an invested interest in the actual product. They want you to take pride in your work. They want your ideas to shine through. They listen to you when you mention problems and solutions or have ideas. These are the companies, right? The ones that reject the you're a cog in the machine culture. These are the ones where you can typically push back and should push back, right? Because when it's accepted, pushing back against your employer is a great way to make a name for yourself. If you make good suggestions. Now, you still have to be polite. You don't call someone up and go like, Jerry's an effing idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing and slam the phone down. This isn't, Wall Street. This is quite literally, you saying, hey, I'm concerned that this is going to slow this page down. I'm concerned that this is going to hurt our SEO, right? So what you need to do is you can make a good culture for yourself where you can go, hey, I know this got through a couple things of peer review, but I think this is going to crash the site, right? And then you might become the savior of the day, right? Everyone says oh my God, you stopped this thing from crashing. You helped our SEO, you helped this, you helped that. So it's a great way, if you do it properly, to get sort of a good reputation within the company. Now, the thing is if your company does subscribe to you're a subordinate, you're a cog in the machine, sometimes you just can't push back. Sometimes they just don't care. They won't listen. They actually get mad and you'll actually worsen your reputation. So you do have to watch this. You have to kind of see what's up, learn how your company operates. Some people just want you to do the tickets in front of you and shut up. And of course, there's going to be some requests that come across your desk, even in a company that doesn't want you to talk back, let's say, push back, that are going to be too ridiculous and you're going to have to push back. Things like, just do 9 days worth of work in 3. That's easy, right? Just do it real quick. It's okay, right? No, it's not, right? And you're going to have to produce some pushback there. But me personally, I prefer the companies where you can actually go back and talk to people and be like, hey, this isn't going to work, but I have this workaround. Hey, I have this solution. Hey, by the way, I think this is broken or this isn't working as it should. Maybe we need to take a look at this. Having a bit of pride in your work and a bit of a small stake in the game, at least, makes things actually feel a lot better. It doesn't feel like I'm just sort of working and pushing it into the ether and hoping that someone just takes my work and I don't actually care where, that web page or wherever it ends up.
I 100% agree. And the companies that will succeed more often than not are companies that allow, in this case, obviously any department has their own things, but in this case, engineering to be able to talk and be able to maybe go skip a level, maybe just give an ability for engineers to push back. I think a lot of companies lose this as they grow because of the complexity of that system without having to go over someone's head and without, pissing off this middle manager or pissing off that manager. That gets very difficult to manage and maintain. But if you hire correctly and if you stay smaller or you stay as lean as possible, it's a little bit easier. Where it becomes a little bit complicated is you see a lot of people recommending these very passive aggressive routes of dealing with more toxic company situations where a toxic company won't listen to you, or where a toxic company will try to blame you for things that you didn't do, even though you said stuff. A lot of advice is, hey, just, make sure you have everything in writing, make sure you have, you record all the conversations as much as you can, take notes from the conversations, and, you try to fight back with that information. And I get that recommendation, but from my experience, for example, if a company were to start blaming you for things and then you come back at them being well, I told you so here and I told you so there, typically that's not going to help your case. And that's going to make you seem I'm saying this from a perspective of that company is wrong, But in my opinion, in those situations, what an employee should do is almost understand the situation. People are trying to scapegoat you and start looking for another job. Continue to work, continue to get your paycheck. If you've pushed back a couple times and you've been shut down and you've been told that you're wrong and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the most likely scenario in that case is they're trying to push you out or they're trying to blame someone else for someone else's thing and you're being the scapegoat. Whether you have receipts or not is probably not going to help you depending on the state where you live, depending on the country where you live. A lot of places are like, you don't need any excuse. You don't need any reason to fire someone and they're just going to fire you even though it wasn't your fault. You can try to fight that with an employment lawyer, et cetera, but the reality is that becomes very difficult, very expensive. So the best course of action in my mind, as soon as the company starts disrespecting you like that, start looking for new work, do your job as best as you can while you're doing that, and try to transition to a company that does respect you. Because I don't think there's any point in trying to fight a company that doesn't respect you and try to prove that you were right to them. It's a weird little thing that I've seen happen, especially on Reddit, where like, just start recording all the conversations. Like, yeah, that's really going to help with toxic bosses. They're going to be really thankful for you to be like, oh yeah, that's right, I was wrong. Thanks for pointing that out for me. They're not going to do that. They're going to try to blame it on you anyway.
Well, we've had it too, where it's not necessarily toxic bosses, but we've had it where we've had toxic clients where like they'll ask us to do something and they'll give us a detailed report of what to do. We deliver on what they said to a T. Like one time, I think it was, they wanted a random sports picture as the background. It was a landing page with their logo or just their text, like the company name, and like a coming soon. We did that. And we were like, is there any specific images you want? Historical, new, old, whatever. What do you want? And it was sort of like, just do it. Like, don't worry about it. It can be anything. We do it. And then all of a sudden, like we got called and they're like, this idea is like garbage. Like you made me realize that it's totally like shite. You don't get my vision. You don't get this. You don't get that. You're not doing it correctly. And all it was that they wanted particular sports imagery in the background, but they never said what it was. They actually said they didn't care. So how would I know that? And then when we went and we changed the sports imagery, they're like, well, why isn't this page interactive? You never asked for that, right? And that becomes that toxic back and forth. Like, what do you mean? Like, did you want me to make you like the world's best sports blog on the side as a surprise? What did you expect me to do? You're paying me $50. This was a number of years ago to make a landing page that's like a couple of megabytes. Like, what do you mean? And what ends up happening, like Mike's saying, is like, even when the evidence, if you have the evidence, you present it, you typically don't get very far because the people are usually belligerent. They're convinced 100% it's your fault. Anything that you say is like, you have an invested interest in getting paid and getting paid quick and not doing a lot of work. So anything you say to push back, they're like, oh, you just don't understand the vision. You don't want to do this for free. You don't want to do my revisions, and it's just like belligerent. It's like, you did this wrong. I don't want it this way. I don't like it. You've ruined my company and all this. We've had that. We've had conversations like that. And then what I do is I do the pushback. Okay, what is it that you'd like me to do? And then if they say, I want this, we're like, we already did that and you didn't like that. So what is it that you want me to do? Start becoming really monotone. The problem is then we're both belligerent. And Mike's right. Do you really want to work there at the end of the day? Probably not. It's time to dump that client or like find a new job, because it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, at least in our experience. And this leads nicely actually to the next point we have, which is, we talked about pushing back against an employer. What about a client? So freelancing in running like a web dev agency is really, really common in the web development space, of course. And when you're dealing with a client, you're commonly brought in as a web developer, of course, but also as a consultant. You're brought in as an expert in your field. Oftentimes you're not working with a team, although sometimes you are. It's just you. And we, meaning Mike and I, push back against client requests all the time. We will almost always provide evidence for our decisions, like, hey, we shouldn't do this because of this. Hey, we shouldn't do that because of this. Hey, your competitor did this and then took it down really quick. Things like that, right? And we ultimately will do the pushback, and we will ultimately let the client make their own decision. But the difference here is that if the client really wants something and they're being uncompromising and they really want something done that we are very against, we can always just leave the project, assuming the contract allows us to do that. We can just go, you know what, man, I don't think this is a good fit. And just, you're going to have to hire another web developer, sorry, or I'll help transition you to like my friend. He's willing to do it, like whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you get out of there. And that's happened. Like, we've absolutely had that. We've had SaaS businesses that have completely kind of literally exploded, where the profit margins weren't enough. So now they're calling us all the time because the server is down, but they can't afford to pay for a new server. I'm not willing to front that. Total disaster, like actual and complete utter disaster. And it comes to a point where we didn't have a contract. We were just sort of like helping them. And so I just called them one day and I said, I'm going to help you transition to someone else, man. I'm out of here. And they said, well, if you're not going to help us, I'm shutting it down. I was like, cool, we're going to shut her down then. Because I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. Sorry, man. Like, this is not working for me. It's not working for you. The push back and forth just isn't working, so you can leave. And so that's kind of the benefit of working for a client, is because you are brought in as the expert. And so oftentimes you pushing back is actually what they're looking for. And if you hit that sort of like wall of belligerence, which I really like that actually, the wall of belligerence, if you hit that wall, oftentimes you can just say, you know what, man, I'm out of here. Or contract says I can leave in 2 months. I'm going to be done at the end of my tenure. Let's work on transitioning you to another agency, to another developer, or hiring somebody, whatever. And of course, even though they're clients, sometimes you will be hired into an in-house team. This situation gets a little bit trickier with the pushback, right? Because you're not necessarily hired as the expert in your field. You're not playing the consultant role. You're not playing the sort of like, I don't know, the web dev confidant, the technical confidant, if you will. You are hired to help the throughput of the team. You're less a general expert and you're more of a, hey, do these tickets because our team doesn't like doing these type of tickets, right? At that point, you have to kind of hedge your bets. You have to see, just like pushing it back against an employer. Do they want me to push back? Do they not? Am I a cog in the machine, or do they want me involved? You have to kind of figure that out for yourself.
I think there's a little bit of nuance here too, is that like you can come in, you can not be quote unquote the expert, but you can notice obvious like bad decisions around you. The thing you shouldn't do is just start pointing all of them out all at once. If you come in and be like, this is all garbage to the entire team or to your manager or something like that, and you come and give a kind of a negative vibe, that can be seen badly from every single angle, including like the technical team that implemented all the bad decisions, or the manager that's come in and hired you, and then all of a sudden you're just bringing a negative, outcome to his or her project. It's just, that's not the way to handle that situation. Even if you think that you're helping, the way to handle it is to start small and slowly guide as much as you possibly can and see where those boundaries are. So if you give like a really small suggestion, like, hey, for instance, maybe the fonts are put into the wrong folder. Like usually the standard is putting into this folder, but they put it into that folder. That's a good one to be like, okay, maybe that's the one I suggest. Like, hey, usually we do that like this because X, Y, and Z. Do you think that's good? And if you get good positive feedback, you can continue slowly chipping away at certain decisions that were made and helping out the project without pointing blame, right? Like the worst thing you can do is be like, Jim over here did this all wrong. And then all of a sudden you're the contractor pointing out that the full-time employee is shit. You're going to be cut. You're just going to be cut. I can guarantee you, even if you're giving the right advice, unfortunately. If you point out that this is maybe a better way to do it, or have you guys ever tried this? That can be seen as more constructive feedback, that can be seen as helping, and that could be seen in a very positive light, and that can even progress you into a way to maybe get full hire or, continue your contract with them. So it's a nuanced approach in this situation, and make sure that you test the waters of something small rather than coming in, with like a bat out of hell and trying to fix everything all at once.
And I actually have a story about this briefly, where we were working on a project, because Mike is 100,000% right in this instance. You can't just come in and correct everything, because we had a person hire a person to keep us in check one time. And this person came on the call and it became an actual disaster. We were yelling at each other. One of the people had to leave the call because they were late for an in-person meeting. This person refused to hang up because they were like, we have to talk about this. Like, Matt's doing all this wrong. I was like, I don't know what you want from me. I only do what I'm told, whatever. We also had like a bunch of like different things we had to adhere to at the time. And so I was like, we can't do that because it breaks this adherence. We can't do that because it breaks this adherence, et cetera, et cetera. And like a broken record, I was like, this breaks this adherence. It breaks this, it breaks that, it breaks this. And this person was just on us. This was a person where I actually had to it was the first time ever I had to quote unquote pull them aside in email and say, don't do this to me again. And if you do, I'm leaving. What ended up happening was I was starting to be fed customer requests. You're the developer behind the scenes, and we're having trouble dealing with the customers. So basically what it was is like customer would have a problem. They'd message the marketing or the more of the customer facing team. I don't know what they call themselves. And then they weren't sure of the solution. They would ask me privately, and then I could like guide them slightly on like how to help the person. They decided that it was quicker just to start handing me customer requests. So now my information is out among the customers, and I'm a contractor. So now like I got people calling me for help on like, how do I log in? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I was like, I am absolutely not doing your level 1 IT stuff. Under no circumstance. A, it's going to slow me down. B, you're going to get really, really mad if I'm slowed down. And C, that's not my job. Well, we're struggling. Cool. Didn't ask about that. And that's how blunt you have to be sometimes. This is where things go, right? Where you have to push back. You have to do it, because I took about 2 requests. It was like, absolutely not. I'm putting a stop to this right now. And we were working with an employee at the time, and I was like, do not answer any of these requests. I'm putting a stop to this now, because I don't want this to become a thing where we help people. That isn't part of our job. We would need to renegotiate a contract as a result of that. And so you do need to push back. Like, absolutely you need to push back, because like, man, I was mad that day. Let's just say that. Not a good day. Not a good day to wake up to just like, who are all these people? Oh, these are not my clients. These are someone else's. Great. Fantastic. I'm doing all their level 1 IT stuff. Have you tried connecting to the Wi-Fi? Do you know your Wi-Fi password? Not doing that. That wasn't what I was hired to do. And this last one here, it's more lighthearted. It's how far should you go to make a client's request come true? So this is pretty niche. That's why it's at the end of the episode. But some client requests offer the client a tiny convenience, right? And what happens is it's a tiny convenience for them. So they think, you know what? I just really want this publish button to act different, or I want this little thing to act different. It would save me a click, 1 click, right? Tiny convenience. So they think it's a tiny convenience. It's a tiny bit of development. Not necessarily true. It may be tied to a huge development cycle, which includes lots of initial time, lots of complexities, and now technical debt and maintenance. So, you know, at that point, you're like, oh, hey, why do you want this little tiny thing? We have to go and actually change core files to get this to work. And every time the actual app that we're using or plugin that we're using updates, I'm going to have to like rechange the core. You know, this is not good. You know, I don't want this to happen this way. And what I find in general with these type of requests is what ends up happening is the client really wants you to kind of hold their hand. They want you to make sure that their experience, meaning their UX, is like totally smooth. They can make no mistake, right? Every edge case is covered. They can't accidentally add too many or remove things or whatever it is that they might accidentally do. They want you to like really, really hold their hand. And this is where I just want to have this discussion with Mike, actually, is that like, how much are we willing to handhold people? Some of this stuff is going to fall under, you know, the superfluous, the this, the that. But what usually happens when you're handholding somebody is the requests come in rapid fire. Like on Monday, they ask for this. On Tuesday, they ask for this. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And like for like weeks, they're asking for all these tiny changes. And now that's like this big leaning tower of like random changes. And all we're doing is making sure that they can basically run through the CMS like a bull in a china shop and not knock anything over. And in my mind, it's removing them from responsibility. They don't want to take accountability for any of their actions. They don't want to take accountability for missing that, you know, they were supposed to click on open this link in a new tab and they forgot to click that. They want all links to open a new tab, and they want me to change how the CMS handles links, for example, because they don't want that to ever be a problem for them, or, oh my God, like what's going to happen? They just want to be able to run at full speed, not double check their work. And they want, if there's any problem with the links, they go, oh, the IT team or the development team, it's their problem. So what do you think about that? Because that happens a lot. It's happened in my IT jobs. It's happened, you know, it happens now as a web developer. Like, what do you think on that, Mike? Like, to me, I push back, but it's a weird niche situation, because usually it's like, okay, yeah, we won't do this one thing, but let's do these other 8. It's like, now I'm pushing back on 8 requests. Like, what are we doing?
This is a complicated one, because you're right. Every marketing and content team will hate the CMS. No matter how good the CMS is, no matter which CMS it is, it can be 10 different kinds of CMSs. They all hate CMSs. They all hate them because they don't do exactly what they think they should do. And that's a reality you have to accept if you're going to go down this route of helping people with CMSs. And something you can even communicate to them, be like, hey, this is the best we've got. You're not going to love every piece of it. And I think setting expectations is the first thing you have to do right from the get-go, is be able to tell them that nothing is going to be perfect no matter what we do. If we spend 1 billion hours on this, you're still going to find that one edge case that we did not cover. So we need to accept that there's going to be edge cases in the CMS that we cannot solve for. Otherwise, we're going to be spending all of our time on this instead of doing what we should be doing, which is content writing and creating a website that is easy for people to interact with and marketing the website and stuff like that. That's where you have to kind of drive them to. Now, you can do all that all you want, and most likely they're still going to, say, okay, that's fine. And then they're going to start pushing back and demand a bunch of features. The other side to this is that them demanding infinite features gives you infinite amount of work. This is the side of the, get into a good freelancing contract or multiple freelancing contracts that never end. And this is where they come, is like they never end because, hey, you get that product up and all of a sudden they need 15 features and then 15 more features, and you're just consistently working on that project and they're consistently paying you. And it's low effort work because you're just doing little, fixes to the CMS and you get your money. And, that's the strategy, because like I said, they're never going to be fully happy with it. Maybe 5 years down the line, they're going to come back and be like, why do we even go down this route with you? But you've just made 5 years worth of profits and you can move on to the next company that does that. And this is maybe me being a little bit cynical and a little bit weird in that sense, but this is the reality. No matter what we do in this industry, in the CMS industry specifically, we can't appease every client. And that's why all these CMSs, the general CMS like WordPress, Webflow, they try to solve for, the 80%, and they let the other stuff go by the wayside because they know that it's impossible to get every edge case. And that's, I think, the way you have to think about it too. And as long as you set the expectations and then you profit from it, I think it's okay for them to keep demanding features and you keep working on them. Features that aren't feasible, push back. Features that might take a little bit of time, just, tell them, hey, this is how long it's going to take, and keep going. You can't say no to everything. And saying no to most things is also not a good idea. So you're going to have to give in to some weird features here and there and be okay with the fact that you're still generating income from that.
That's a good call, is keeping your income in check and realistically keeping the company's income in check as well, because you're keeping the marketing team going, even if it's not perfectly. And then you're not, fulfilling 100% of the requests. So you're not getting constantly bogged down in the small stuff. And I'll add a small tip to this. So one of the things that I do is I always say, let me take a look if that's possible. And I go and I quickly test. I usually have just a quick and dirty test project somewhere that I can break 1 million times over and it doesn't matter. And I'll go and I'll quickly either build a proof of concept of something similar to what they're asking for, but is typically easier to implement, assuming that the thing they asked for is difficult. And I'll say, hey, I got this working, but it works a little bit different. Is this okay? About 7 out of 10 times it's okay, right? And now it's okay, great. So now I've just implemented something that's easy for me to maintain, easier for me to do, and they're happy enough with it moving on. That's a great way to do it. It's compromising in the moment rather than asking for a compromise out of the gate. It's much better because now they've waited a couple of days or waited a week, depending on, again, whatever they asked. And now they're seeing Matt can't do exactly what I asked, but he took an effort and he actually built something. And like I said, I usually send over a link to a proof of concept and go, hey man, this is what this looks like. This is how this works, whatever. And is that okay? And usually the answer is yes. Usually it is. I think that's it. I think we've done it. We've done the episode. We've done how to push back. We've pushed back. I don't have a way to say it. We've pushed back on the wall of belligerence.
Wall of belligerence. Yep, I like that.
Love the wall of belligerence. But remember that we are on Patreon. That is patreon.com/HTML all the things in case you want to support the show. And I would like to say one thing too, is some people are signing up for the $3 tier. I reach out on Patreon via the messaging system there. It's worked for many people, but I feel like some people miss it. If you're one of the people that have signed up and didn't answer me, I do literally say, if you don't care about getting a shout out, just don't answer. Totally cool. I'm just letting everybody know, if you're listening, hey, I have sent out the things on Patreon. So just letting you know. Anyway, many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Webhacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Joshua via silvio.us, and Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. And we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Remember to check us out on Daily Dev as well, daily.dev. We just started our squad. It may be in full swing by the time this episode comes out. Who knows? And go check out Magic Mind. Get that 20% off. Get the good stuff. And feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on. And this wall of belligerence is signing off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.